Spiel ist aber auch richtig, richtig, richtig gut gemacht, Mann.
As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Bernardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Bernardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? Huh? A lever? That was new. Most people still use doorknobs. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands and thousands had died. But Bernardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Haven't you always wanted to do that? Smash! Touché, he said, and died.
Oh, das ist echt schwer, da durchzukommen.
I guess now I find out what's next, he thought.
Teekampe! Okay, da muss ich erstmal ganz lange denken, bis ich da durchkomme. Tch. Ich wusste nicht, dass das geht.
I pick you! Surprisingly unwounded.
Wieso ist das gerade passiert?
Can I borrow that? That he didn't feel more pain. Just a bit dizzy. Ooh. That had been his mistake before. Trusting his old friend Lapino, who had been through so many battles with him and shed so many heartaches, who he'd rescued so many times. What was up with that guy anyway? There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia.
Ihr wisst, was passiert ist mit Reynado, also werde ich das nicht tun.
Across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. Trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. If only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Bernardo felt a little better. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. get all the ingredients for a pretty nifty sword. Of course there was a puzzle. You couldn't expect the Transcendent Emperor to bury a god's eye in a leather sack where anyone could pick it up. I'm sorry. Is that your shield? The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it.
Leute, soll ich... Soll ich die Waffe jetzt testen oder soll ich zum Wissenschaftler gehen? Inzwischen weiß ich ja, dass der Wissenschaftler, da kamen ja auch die Soldaten des Imperators an. Ich bin jetzt nicht ganz sicher, ich muss denken.
Renato had never been much of a student. At Swordfu school, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Sky Ripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists. Right? Exactly. As he set out down the path, Renato wondered why the parts of the Sky Ripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. I'll just have a dash, thought Renato. Well, no sense collecting more materials. It was time to make something pointy.
Boah, wisst ihr, wie schwierig das war, da reinzugehen und den Zauberer zu töten? Renato wondered if he could learn to cook this way. Probably not. He was tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. It made strange, mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum. The Sky Ripper was following his every step. At least it acknowledged him as the master. But there was no trigger. How was he supposed to fire it? Fire, he said. Nothing happened. Well, maybe it just needed to warm up. After all, it hadn't been fired in thousands of years. Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway.
Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Bernardo had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out. "Bernardo!" It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia. "Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world." "Yeah, sure it will," cracked Bernardo. "Pull the other one."
If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras. He'll tell you the same thing.
Oh, she would say that. That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating. Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it.
Soll ich mir das erklären lassen von einem Verbündeten vom großen Imperator oder soll ich das den Rebellen bringen? Ich bin mir nicht sicher. Muss auch mal kurz nachdenken.
Just this once, he would not let Zenobia get into his head with her logic and her wisdom and her appeals to reason. He was a fox. He'd go with his instincts, and it would all work out like it always did. Oh, he was sounding like a reckless idiot, even to himself. But if there was one thing Bernardo could never bring himself to do, it was turn back on a decision he'd made. Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of the superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon. That would come in handy in a pinch. If I craft a sword now, it's going to be really short.
we're talking about. This was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. He was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. She'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, no one was going to distract him. For some reason,
Alter, was das für Kombination aus Ton?
His mother had told him about a land where only the apes talked. Animals went around without clothes. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
That was awesome!
What's there? As he headed towards the council chamber, Bernardo felt everyone watching him. "You've saved the rebellion," said the council speaker. "Frankly, we were afraid you'd turn aside to save that idiot Lapino." Not bloody likely, Bernardo told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit. "If you never make sacrifices," he said, "you're probably not doing the right thing." The speaker nodded. "Are you ready to lead the charge?" "Let's roll," he said, with grim satisfaction. Bernardo set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its wine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself.
He was ready. So was Skyripper. The Skyripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire.
This was going to be a short battle. He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero. He wasn't that good. Yet.
To aim it.
If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger.
Boys! Caught the lead, Raven.
Parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender. A trick? Maybe she really believed it. He could hear horns blaring the retreat. Maybe it was true. Maybe they had one. This thing really needed a roof. And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him. Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too. You're the enemy, he said. I was never your enemy, Renato. Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him.
Toll. Der Feind, der die Rahmen kontrollierte, hatte Gefühle für mich. Es ist ja schön.
that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lupino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lupino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lupino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lupino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lupino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Sword, thought Renato. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore. People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renato had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Ravens call about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. The village looked so peaceful. Were the villagers hiding somewhere? Of course not. No matter how much he searched, he would only find ravens here. Ooh, Renato loved to improve his gear. He hadn't noticed that path before. Every day he was getting better and better. Landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. A snack? Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest. Hey, what do ravens say when they die? Never mind. I'll wait. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Bernardo recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, we see this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the
Ich weiß,
Emperor's
was du
greatest
sagst. Ich
general,
muss es nicht mehr
who happened
lesen.
to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Bernardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lupino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that. The core of the Sky Ripper? Lupino's excited. That's an actual thing that we could just go and get. You've been busy. He sure had. Bernardo told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. Bernardo grinned. He had a very good feeling about this. It's beautiful here, thought Bernardo. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lupino was a traitor. But still, he was good company.
Wie oft ich hier jetzt schon war.
Ice walls only let you through if they knew you were cool. should really look for another line
Hoppla,
of
das
work,
wollte ich
he
nicht.
thought.
Ich schlag immer
And then
zweimal
he
drauf.
died. Oops. Thought, Renato? You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, a few birds. He didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones. No healthy ones. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. Renato thought. Maybe Lapina was right. Maybe he should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. Boy, someone has spent a lot of money for a graduation present. Renato hoped his mother wasn't watching. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it. Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost. The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Reynardo. But what if this was a ruse so that Lapino could get the core into the hands of the Empire? Was Reynardo ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Reynardo knew that. You're brave, I know, Reynardo said. But this is what I was hired to do. Oh, well, at least let me run ahead and warn them you're coming. Reynardo wondered if Lapino was up to no good. What if the rabbit warned the Empire instead? Oh, but Lapino wouldn't betray him like that. Not again. Before it'd been a fluke, right? They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. He would offer Lapino a chance to betray him, or not to. His old friend deserved another chance to prove true. All right, Reynardo said. Go. As Reynardo watched Lapino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lapino? That was a recipe for disaster. Bernardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. A piecemeal death, like old age. Bernardo had a lot of crafting materials. Now all he needed was a crafting bench. The Nexus Observatory had some of the Empire's greatest scientists. If anyone could rig the core into a useful weapon, and even better, make it stop leaking poison, it would be them. Hey! Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling.
Ach komm, 5 Erz.
What were these poles, exactly? Parking meters from the time of the Lost Gods? So much. It was time to turn it into something he could use. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Bernardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk. The ravens, they must have known we were coming, said Lupino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base. Bernardo wasn't sure he believed that. But Lupino was talking so fast. He always seemed to make sense. The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. The core was killing him. He needed help. The sage, Calaveras, had given him the maps to find the armature and the core. If anyone knew the true name of the Transcendent Emperor, if anyone knew how to assemble the Sky Ripper, Calaveras did. If anyone could heal Reynardo and render the core safe, at least to its bearer, surely it was he. The base of the mountain was the only safe place for a landing. He would have to continue on foot, muscles aching. Calaveras was a scholar, not a doctor. Could he really save Reynardo from the poison radiating from the lost god's eye he was so recklessly carrying? Reynardo wondered if his future... Oh, this was not a fun way to die. Even if he survived, no one would write ballads about the fox whose knees ached forever, would they? Not unless he paid for it. He hated paying for publicity. It was chilling walking through the living mountains. There was always noise up ahead. Insects, birds, the croak and flutter of ravens arranging ambushes. But close by, there was only the breeze and the trickle of melting snow. As if every living thing was holding its breath for his poisonous burden to move on. Reynardo's paws were getting numb. Calaveras really didn't want company, did he? Laundress was going to get all these bloodstains out of his tunic. was much easier than free climbing. What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever? Had that door been opened before? Time was running out for the rebellion. They might already be fighting the Imperial fleet. Everything hinged on Calaveras' ability to turn an exiled god's eye into something deadly.
The core! Splendid! Croaked Calaveras. Where's the armature?
Right, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't need it.
No, I don't. It's just a professional interest. We've got much better prismatics than the old TE ever did.
So Calaveras was an arcane engineer. He fussed at the core all day. He wrapped it with silver chains, and in front of it, he placed a huge, round ruby, so that it looked like a monstrous, floating eye. Ah, so, what is it?
Yeah, I call it the Oculum. It's my very first death ray.
And it won't poison me?
Oh, no, it's completely safe now.
Anything I should watch out for?
Yeah, try to avoid pointing at any mirrors.
As he loaded the Oculum onto the Farfarer, Bernardo was a little concerned about Calaveras. People who were utterly sure of themselves, he had found, were either experts or horribly wrong. Or both. But Renato only needed to fire the oculum once. He only needed to destroy one ship. The Emperor's ship. And the war was over. Renato plunged into the Imperial fleet. He felt the oculum humming. He no longer felt sick. This was going to be fun. Or at least, it was going to be over. Renato resisted the temptation to fire the oculum until the time came. He could sense its arcane energies yearning to escape the sage's wrappings. But it wasn't eating him alive. So that was a plus. He felt good about himself. He'd saved a friend, he'd helped the rebels, he'd relied on himself, but he'd listened to others. He felt like the right sort of hero. Wise, yet decisive. Calaveras seemed so sure it would work. Maybe he could fire it just a few times. No harm in that, right? But only when he absolutely needed to. It was good to practice your moves, thought Renato. Keeps you limber. Renato had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what? Sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he? Renato's arm was getting tired. The core was no longer eating at him, but he still felt weak. His stamina was shot. But he had the oculum. When the ravens swarmed him, it would sometimes fire its death ray. It seemed to be warming up, too, firing more and more often. Maybe he should let it cool off. He decided to stop using it entirely. This could be the new aerobics craze. Am I right? What did you do if one of these platforms stalled? Odd. The oculum was still hot to the touch. He almost thought it was getting even hotter. Well, that was ridiculous, of course. Anyway, he'd only to fire it one more time, and then he could chuck the whole contraption into the abyss. And the Emperor's ship was now in range. Reynardo squinted. He could make out the line of ravens protecting the ship. Zenobia in front, conjuring. And on the deck, yes, that was his Imperial Majesty, pacing in his golden armor. Reynardo lined up his shot and fired. Caught in the beam, the ship burst into flames. The ravens and Zenobia exploded. The Emperor, too, exploded. Reynardo waited for the beam to stop, but it only got brighter, and the oculum hotter. Frantic, Reynardo pulled the oculum towards the abyss. The ruby burst into flames. The shiny metal casing glowed, then melted. That was good. Now the core could cool off, right? Reynardo ran. The blast incinerated him instantly, along with both fleets. The shockwave could be felt across all Erda. That winter, with neither Empire nor rebels to rule them, the island slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. And just like that, he was alive again. And back
Also
on the
das Ende war jetzt irgendwie, ich hab die Welt zerstört.
The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The core was powerful, but dangerous if used improperly. But he was starting to feel like he was
Eine
getting the
Geschichte
hang
schaffe
of
ich,
it.
glaube ich, noch. Eine mache ich
There
noch.
was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? The air here tasted bitter. The steps were too tall for a person. The entire place felt restless, like it had been vexed to nightmare under the dust, waiting for its hour to come around at last. Smelt burnt fur. His. Within, ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. What's for dinner?
Das ist total scheiße. Es wird mir nicht angezeigt, ob ich so einen Superwolf angreife.
You'll always have Paris.
Okay, die machen mal sau viel Schaden.
And then he died. There was a pleasant breeze coming through that door. Had it been closed before? is yours, said Reynardo, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. He was practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things.
Diese ganze Trophäen immer.
Reynardo was running out of ideas. Zenobia loved him to death. The Sky Ripper destroyed everything, and Lapino was a filthy traitor. Using a stone name for an evil god seemed unwise. But what else was there? Yeah. The mysterious sword from the east made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted.
Fresh meat.
Sometimes, all you know is what you know. You know?
Was war das gerade?
That had gone rather well, actually. The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. This was definitely better than pulling yourself up in a bucket. was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager. Thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. Not the core, said the stone anxiously.
Also das ist jetzt irgendwie interessant. Wenn ich die Tochter des Imperators töte, die Frau da, der Frauenhase da, dann wird mich der Stein zum Imperator machen. Mal sehen. Klingt sehr verlockend, aber auch irgendwie sehr machtgierig. Aber ich werde mal so machtgierig sein.
Why was he listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself.
To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies.
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the Transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feeding the souls, it whispered. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood. All right, I get it.
This was going to be interesting. He needed some way to break the ice with this wall, so to speak. Should have faked left and then gone left, he thought. And then, he never thought again. Zenobia was waiting for Renato. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone.
And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled. She spotted the stone and bolted without another word. People had laughed at the government workbench placement program, but you could see the benefits everywhere. Sensed the jewel's power. He had a feeling they were going to be great friends.
What does the fox say? Asked one raven. Another one called back, "Oh, I'm dying!" And they both laughed hysterically.
The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Renato. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power. Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. Kill her, whispered the stone. You cannot win your rebellion without it. Please. No, said Zenobia. Not that way. Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be?
Das ist so mies, ey.
With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Renato felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such brilliance, exulted the Iblis stone. Tasty. He felt
a bit bad about killing her. He was pretty sure she still loved him. But needs must when the devil drives. Renato returns to the Farfarer and set a course for the Nexus. The Empire had a communication outpost there. He could call the Emperor directly. It was time to seize the outpost and let the Emperor know what he had done. The Nexus was beautiful. He never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. The black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there. Once you tried, you're hooked. Renato checked for a false compartment. Nope. Up ahead was Lapino. What was he doing here?
Bernardo! Hey, buddy! Hey there, old buddy! Please don't kill me.
Why would I kill you? Asked Renato, although he had been thinking about it.
Well, you've become... look, I mean, no disrespect at all here. Kind of evil? Maybe you should, I don't know, go to the mountains to have a think? See if maybe you're sure the stone is not all that healthy a thing to keep?
I suppose you wanted, Renato said, and poked Lapino in the chest for emphasis. Oh, had he just killed Lapino? Oh, damn it. Oh, they really ought to put a railing on this thing, he thought.
Jetzt ist mir gerade aufgefallen, ich bin echt böse geworden.
Renato rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the far speaker toad. After all, he wanted a word with the Emperor. But there was only silence. The Emperor was scared, like little girl. Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Yes! Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his far speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lupino.
Also entweder ich lösche den Imperator aus und werde das richtige Boss, ey. Und werde der Imperator und ich werde der neue böse Lord werden. Und werde den Alten ausrotten mit dem Stein an meiner Seite. Oder ich werde in die Berge gehen und nochmal darüber nachdenken, mit wem ich zusammenarbeiten sollte und den Stein zerstören. Nee, ich gehe in den Kampf, Leute. Ich bin böse.
Called the rebel council to let them know to gather their forces. Then he killed the far speaker toad. Why? Well, because to make sure his sword was sharp. Oh no, that's awful. So no one else could use it. Yes, that's it. Then he set off for the ruins and the secret rebel base. The ruins were... Probably looking for the secret base, Renato thought. But then he realized they're probably looking for me. They must be very scared of me. Well, here I am. You are the honest warrior ever, whispered the Iblistone. And he had to agree with it, for once. Who was as good as Renato? Swell. He'd always wanted to do that. Artisans he was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator. Renato was so happy. The stone was the best friend he'd ever had. Really, who would bury such a treasure in the desert? Soon, he'd go rally the rebellion and usher a new age for the islands of Erda. You are the best, urged the stone. Let me make you emperor. Come to think of it, Renato thought as he put down another raven, why shouldn't I be emperor? How did anybody get to be emperor anyway? By making war. I'm not counting the transcendent emperor, obviously, who had banished the lost gods in the start of time. Yes, he should be emperor. He would make a great emperor. Right, Stone? Right, boss. You know, ore is pretty heavy to carry. You know what's not? A new sword. So this was what it was. Not nearly as much fun as they said. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Follow my nose, thought Renato. Renato strode into the council. Let's do this thing. Let's make me emperor. They looked confused and nervous. Ah, had he mentioned the emperor thing? Yeah, he meant to bring that up later. I mean, let's go win this rebellion. He waved his sword around encouragingly. They ran. Cowards. He'd stop them. He cut down a few to inspire the others. But soon, there was no one to cut down. Well then, he'd have to attack the fleet alone. More for me, he said. Unless it was the stone that said it. Traitors. Traitors, all of them. They'd run rather than following him, rather than cheering him. What should he do to the cowards? Anything he wanted to. After all, he was a true hero, the best warrior there ever was. No one could stop him now. But first, finish him. The Emperor, that is. Where was the rebel fleet? They weren't even trying an assault. They were going to miss a day in history. The downfall of this dynasty, and a new one to take its place. He didn't have to kill all the ravens. He could enslave them, and enslave the toads too. All the animals would worship him as a god, for he had once been a god. They would willingly give him their blood and their souls. And the world would change, would become familiar again. Bernardo had been to a dungeon once where all the chests had teeth and eyes. It had been a short visit. Bernardo was glowing with dark power. Already the sun had dimmed. He could do anything, he realized. He could wrap the island safely in smoke again. He was beyond a hero. He was going to become a god again. How odd, he thought, that the Iblis Stone had nothing to say about any of this. Well, no matter. Once he killed this petty toad emperor, he would bring back the Black Sun.
Brilliant. Lovely. Hold that pose.
Die Kämpfe sind echt schwer geworden. Man muss sich anstrengen.
Oh, this really didn't have much in the way of safety features, did it? Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? He found the Emperor and the Council huddling by his ship, plotting. They saw him and cowered before him.
Back to hell, fiend.
Croaked the Emperor desperately.
In the name of the Transcendent Emperor!
Croaked the speaker. They held some arcane items he didn't recognize. He simply flexed his will and sucked their souls out of their bodies. And Iblis exulted. It is finished. And the void that had been a mere stone on a sword expanded. It stretched and ripped like a vast womb. And a gaze, black and pitiless as the sun, passed through the void into the land. And so time ended.
Oh, damn it.
He lost again, and died. But there was burning Ubar behind him. He still had all his destinies ahead of him. But he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it.
Interessant. Ich wurde echt zu einem dunklen Herrscher und alle starben. Also ich werde das jetzt mal beenden. Ich werde wieder was anderes, wie gesagt, weitermachen. Das Spiel macht noch Fun. Es gibt noch einiges an Enden. Ich jetzt, glaube ich, nicht alles tun, aber einiges werde ich noch versuchen. Oder werde ich doch alles tun? Naja, es gibt nur noch andere Spiele, die ich da testen würde. Naja, es hat Spaß gemacht. Tschüss.